Welcome back to my book reviews, and today we're going to look at one of my classic kind of blunder novels, which is called The Sick Rose. So grab some popcorn, grab a soft drink, and sit back and relax as I talk about this book with a bit more confidence. Well, hello there, it's me, Suited in Black / Janne Karneus, and I kind of recently decided that I wanted to redo some of my older videos in the newer style so that they're just slightly more just confidently delivered and a bit cleaner edited and just clearer as a review so that you understand it better and I don't go on forever. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I need a bit of strength to look at this book again because, this is the book that I originally despised on the channel. This is the original infamous book of Suited in Black, which of course is The Sick Rose by Erin Kelly. So unfortunately, like I said in the first time I reviewed this book, I just hated this book so much. It just had so many issues and it was just so poorly executed as a thriller that I really disliked The Sick Rose. But now, why don't we start to review this in a better way? So if you probably watched my original video, I might delete my old video, but I did kind of quote the poem The Sick Rose. So why don't we approach this book in the sandwich method? So I'm going to look at what's positive about it, the many negatives of this book, and of course what I think could be improved for this book if it were to be redone, or something that would make me more satisfied as a fan of the thriller genre. So I've got my notes right here. It's just like quite barren and just quite just some little points I wanted to point out, because I've also written a little blog post of why I didn't like The Sick Rose. It's like about 1,000 words, and I put it onto my the Janne Karneus author blog, which is on WordPress, so I'll link it down in the description below. And just remember, this is how I feel about the book, so please don't feel personally attacked. If you do like this book, then good, but I just didn't like this book at all, so why don't we just try to, agree to disagree. So as part of the sandwich method, why don't we just begin with just the positive of this book, and it's just like a grand total of 1 positive, to be honest. It's just, yeah, that's how I feel about this book. So the positive of this book is that it's really well written. I really enjoyed the use of the language, the word choice. It flowed quite well. I liked how each description was very immersive. I could feel it. I felt the emotions. I felt how the senses were really in tune with the way it was written. And yeah, so the writing was really solid, and it's the saving grace of what makes me want to check out more by Erin Kelly, because I've heard that, I think it's called The Poison Tree, is a better book than The Sick Rose. But yeah, so maybe I just started with the wrong book and I needed to satisfy me more. But I need quite a bit of strength, because now, why don't we just get straight into the negatives about this book? And there's quite a number, it's like 80% negativity of this novel. I just really didn't like any of these things. So I've got my blog post written right here, and I'm just going to quickly look at some of what made me hate this book. So I wrote here that the most irritating thing about this book was the pacing, which is very true. It was such a slow read because the characters were really boring, and it kind of felt like the plot kind of had no kind of, not dynamicy to it, but any kind of interest from the get-go. Like, the hook of this novel is not that interesting. It's just like the main character Louisa, who's just like hugging a TV because she's missing a person she used to know. And I feel like this just doesn't really work that well for, first of all, a thriller. So maybe my expectations are way too high, but a thriller novel needs to deliver the tension, and this book just doesn't start out with anything of interest that doesn't hook the reader. And so that's one of the problems of this book, is that because it doesn't not rely on literary techniques, but it doesn't, interest the reader that much. And I kind of knew this in the first chapter of The Sick Roses, when she's just she's in her van. She's just got her old video cassettes, and she's watching this kind of musician she was really into and was in love with. And I just feel like it doesn't grab me because it's just kind of presenting a character who's kind of mopey and just kind of angsty about her past, and it just kind of makes me feel a bit like this is just kind of juvenile already, and I'm not interested in those kind of thriller novels. I'm interested in thriller novels that are a bit more challenging and a bit more older, let's say. But the problem is that on top of the slow pace are characters who just kind of never take action, nor do they ever try to do something about the kind of past they've gone through and how they want to maybe resolve it, and maybe how they want to maybe develop themselves or something, like something to deal with the kind of, I guess, trauma. I see that in air quotes, trauma, because quite frankly, the trauma that they go through is anything but traumatic. And so just one more thing about the sluggish pace is that another reason why it's so sluggish is because the motivations of the characters are so bare bones. It just kind of is, again, just really not compelling to read, because you're just going to get the feeling that Daniel's just scared of... I forgot the name of the character, but this is the guy he kind of grew up with, and he's kind of a corrupt criminal. But I just kind of felt like all that he wants to do is just escape him, and I kind of don't have a grasp of what's this person like. I don't understand what does he want in life? What is he aiming to achieve? And that, to me, is the same with Louisa. I think even more so with Louisa. Which brings me on to the characters of the novel. Both Louisa and Daniel are just so boring to read. Like, I really couldn't care less about their dark pasts, which is, one, a cliche of writing, which is about you know, characters who, you know, angst about their dark pasts and be like, oh no, what if it repeats itself? What if the same thing happens again? And it's just like, I get it, yeah, fine, but it's, I feel like, I can't help but feel like I've read that so many times and pretty much everything, that this is just, it's relying on like the cliche of the tragic past or tragic backstory. And I feel like it doesn't do a great job of it either, so I just feel like I'm not compelled by anything about this, about the characters. They just kind of feel they're just kind of run-of-the-mill, really just kind of formulaic, and just kind of nothing original about them. What makes it worse is that these the part of the premise is that these two characters with the dark past try to form a connection with each other, and whether or not this connection will save them or will do something to make their situation better or whatever. But it just feels like it disappoints the premise of the story. So you kind of get to that part and the relationship is so not established that I just kind of felt cheated. That why am I supposed to care about these characters if all they do is just kind of sit around and just kind of don't really do anything? So I know there's like plenty of discussion and kind of dialogue in this novel, but this book just made me think, wow, this is just really... I just couldn't get hooked onto these characters, like, at all. Another thing about the character, especially Louisa, if you couldn't tell, I really don't like Louisa at all in this book. Not that she's insufferable, but at times she kinda is. But overall, she's just bland and a pain in the ass a lot of the times, because she's in love with this musician and this band that she used to kinda hang out with. And it all revolves around this kind of little oopsie that she did that isn't even all that consequential in the end, and it's just there to make her angst about her past, about this little oopsie that she did. A thriller novel, that to me is a major problem, because you're supposed to root for these characters and fear for them, and this book does not make you do that. Like I said in one of my best and worst of the year, this book was a time waster. And so this to me is part of the nail in the coffin for the whole book, and why this book was just a straight up suited mess on the original review. So what promised to be like quite an interesting climax to the story is when, you know, the guy that Daniel knew, his father is all like angry because his son has been imprisoned. And so I don't mean to spoil the book, but, you know, Daniel's friend, he goes to prison, and then the father is just trying to get him out of prison, but he's like angry at Daniel and Louisa. But the problem and most ridiculous part of the story is that this moment of the climax is just done. It's just like, it's finished. Like, what? Okay, so I don't mean to spoil it, but who's gonna read this book? So he says he's gonna kill them, and then the father just literally drives off a cliff. That's literally what happens. He literally calls it quits because this book is just the worst. And then I just felt cheated when this happened. This was terrible. This was truly one of the most disappointing, terrible, and honestly asinine conclusions or climaxes I have ever read. So the climax of this novel was terrible, and is why I really despised this book when I first read it. And then at the very end, right before the epilogue, quite literally, the characters just blow up. I'm not even kidding you. I'm not being ironic. I'm not being sarcastic. They literally blow up. Because there was no other way to end the story without some kaboom to it. So what happens is that there's like a gas leak, and then the little van that Louisa and Daniel were staying in just blows up with them in them. And then, to add insult to injury, is that then it introduces characters no one knows and no one cares about, and you expect them to have this kind of moment of like they see the work that Daniel and Louisa did in this gardening house. Who the fuck cares? And they just break down, and it's just like, what are we supposed to take from this? What's the reader supposed to take from this? Are we supposed to say like, wow, they were so great, such great people? Or for me, did anyone feel nothing from this? It just felt like nothing when I read it. I just felt like, what was the point? Just thinking about this book again is just ridiculous, and I'm still angry at how this book, you know, not treated me, but just how this book was executed, and it just really shows that you need structure, you need some kind of good execution of a story, because otherwise this book just kind of enrages you, and I can't even recommend this book to anyone, especially if you're a thriller fan. You will be majorly disappointed. Why don't I just quickly give like a quick little consensus of this book? So ultimately, this book was just a well-written time waster. It is it's one of the weakest links of the thriller genre, and the problems just lie in the pacing, the lack of interesting characters, and the structure and execution of the story. It makes you suffer with it. I personally don't care, or couldn't care less, about Louisa's dark past. But putting that to the side, why don't we do the sandwich method of having just a bit of positivity at the end, unlike my original video, which was just like 100% negative. So why don't we have just a little thing at the end, just to be like, well, how about if we try to do this? Maybe, what if it was more like this? Because then it would satisfy me as a reader, and I would be like, okay, so if we address these issues, then it would be the book for me, and I would enjoy it more. So remember, this review is just how I felt. So please don't feel angry if you disagree with me, or if you enjoyed this book. But this is just how I felt after reading it and thinking about it. I do think the idea of the story is compelling and has potential. So I think what I would do to maybe fix the characters is maybe, instead of having them like kind of brood about the past, why don't they try to maybe improve themselves a bit more? Why don't they try to have a kind of a life. I know Louisa was trying to do that in this house, but I think it should have been doubled down on so that it was clearly about her trying to improve herself, make herself more mature, make herself more just kind of accepting her past or whatever. And because it's very difficult if you've supposedly killed someone, but which quite spoiler alert, but it doesn't happen. There is no death. But if instead of kind of brooding and just kind of being like a teenager about it, if she was like, maybe she started off that way, but then became a bit more mature about it and tried to be like, it's hard for me to think about, but I'm trying my best to work on it. I think I would have enjoyed that more. I think that sounds more interesting for me. And I think the same with Daniel, if he also tried to maybe show how this bad experience with this guy had to make him grow up faster, and that maybe he also is trying to become an adult like at the age of 17, which is, is traumatic. I get it. But I feel like if this book explored that in a more interesting way, maybe developed on it more, then I would actually maybe enjoy this book a bit more. And I feel like I don't mind if this book was a bit longer so that the climax was properly delivered and executed. And of course, for the sake of rounding off a story, I don't mind a longer length. Yet, despite all that, I still stand by my original rating. So of course, this book still gets a Suited Mess. And I'll show the new artwork of the Suited Mess logo. It's kind of similar to the old one. But yeah, this book is just, it's not how you write a thriller, at least for a reader. This is far too frustrating. It's just a novel that just kind of wastes your time and is quite frankly not how to write a climax. Or at least it should be used as a way to be like, hey, this author did that. That's not how you do it. And I feel like, yeah, if you approach this book with a reverse psychology of like, oh, so that's not how you do it. I know you could also hate read this book, but I'm not really the hate reading type. I want to give something a chance. Because if I hate read something, I just get tired of hating it, and then I just want to be done with it. And, move on. And of course, that will do for this video. So thank you so much for watching, and it means so much to me that you can watch my videos, and hopefully, interact with them and just be like, oh, Jan, oh, I agree with you, Jan, or I disagree with you, Jan, or I feel a bit mixed, to be honest. Please do comment down below. If you have read this book, I would love to discuss, like, the spoilery stuff of the novel, and just be like, well, why do you like this book, or why do you also not like this book? Please do comment down below if you do feel a certain way about this book. So thank you so much for watching, and you know the drill. Until we meet again, I'll be waiting.